Well, we're going to be able to thank our buddy Rene Descartes for this next little tool to help us narrow our search. He developed what we now call Descartes' rule of sign, which tells us that if we have a function, we can determine the number of positive real zeros or the number of negative real zeros. So how do we do that? Well, rule of sign means we're going to look for the number of times the sign changes between terms. So notice between this first term, which is a plus, and this next one, there's a sign change. Negative to a negative, nope, negative to a positive. There's a sign change. And from the last one, positive to a negative. So in this particular instance, on this function, there's 3 sign changes. So what does Rene tell us? He tells us that there's either going to be 3 or 1 positive real zero. So the rule says is that if there's 3 changes, there's going to be 3 possible real zeros, or decrease that number by a positive number. So it's 3 or 1. Maybe a better example, if there were 7 sign changes, then there's going to be 7 positive real zeros, 5 positive real zeros, 3 positive real zeros, or 1 positive real zero. So it helps us determine the number of possible real zeros or positive real zeros. Now he also has a version that we could use to determine the negative ones. And what we do by that one is we look at the function evaluated at negative x. So doing this one becomes a negative 3 times negative x to the 7th minus 2 times negative x to the 5th minus negative x to the 4th plus 7 times negative x to the 2nd plus a negative x minus a 3. Let me clean that up. So this still produces a negative, or it produces a negative 3x to the 7th. Negative x to the 5th is a negative x to the 5th. So it gives me a positive 2x to the 5th. Negative x to the 4th is positive, so this gives me a negative x to the 4th, plus a 7x squared, minus an x, minus a 3. So now I'm going to look at the number of times the sign has changed. Negative to a positive, once there. Positive to a negative, once there. Positive to a negative, or negative to a positive, once there. Positive to a negative, once there. Negative to a negative, nope. So there's 4 in this particular case. So that tells me then that there's either going to be 4 or 2 or 0 negative real zeros. Now, of course, that includes real numbers, which are also irrational numbers, when that doesn't say anything about the complex numbers. So what have we identified here? Descartes' rule of sign helps us to determine either the total number of positive real zeros and the total number of negative real zeros by looking at the times the signs change in 2 different versions of the function. So we're going to look at an example to help us make this a little bit more clear.